not sorry, but welcome back to season 3. Yeah, with a dwellers below, dwellers below.
Hi, everybody out there in Dwellerland. It's your favorite podcast of all time, of all formats, back into your ear holes once again. We are the Dwellers Below, two of the Dwellers. It's Highlander. Soon there will be only one.
The best dwellers, the English dwellers.
Yes, the international show is becoming less international by the moment. In fact, at the moment, we're the British Dwellers. My Scottish compatriots will be very keen to emphasize. But we have a special little nugget of an episode for you today, with Dave and I having both been in the last couple of weekends to some tournaments. So mine was in Whitburn, between Edinburgh and Glasgow, at Mighty Miniatures, I think the store was. Where was yours, Dave?
Mine was at Element Games in Sheffield.
A store with a long pedigree of hosting all manner of wargaming events.
Absolutely. Is this your second event, Chris?
Yeah, I managed to get up to Aberdeen for another one, which we didn't really cover on the podcast, but that was a super fun event at a really nice store there. Riath hosted us and unfortunately lost the final to Jamie's Tomb Kings. But on the flip side, Jamie and his son came first and second, and I think they backed it up at the following one last weekend as well. So some real Ferguson dominance up in the I guess far northeast of Scotland.
That's some serious pedigree. Double tournament wins so far.
Yeah, but yeah, had a cracking game against Jamie in that one there, where we explored every element of angling shenanigans and closing the doors and forcing people into disrupted charges for advantage and things. It was the most geometric game of Warhammer, the Old World, that I've played yet.
I love it. So what's the purpose of today's episode? What are we going to run down?
Well, so we've both been to tournaments, but another element of this is that both of our tournament expeditions were fairly successful. So for a very brief window in time, we get to actually pretend that we can back up our blowhard internet opinions with the cold hard facts of victory. So we're going to give a bit of an overview of both of our tournaments, more of a focus on Dave's. I think he has some maybe some more impressive things to tell us about, but we'll cover both of them, and I guess just some comments on approaches to the game in general based off this limited experience. A couple of caveats. Both of the tournaments were one-dayers, and both of them were less than 2,000 points. So for those of you who are into the Honest Wargamers stat shows, it's all entirely irrelevant and means nothing, I believe, is the official line.
And both relatively small. I mean, mine was 14 players after 2 dropouts. How many was yours, Chris?
We had 7 players after 1 dropout. And as we'll get into, I also had the bye in the first round, so I only actually have 2 games to cover from the event.
But even still, I think with people not yet having played many games of competitive Warhammer, good to have a chat about what it's like, what we find is working for us, and I guess the things that we reckon we're going to see coming up after these tournaments in future events.
Yeah. So maybe if we kick off with mine, as I said, only 2 games to run through. So we had a 1,500 point event with 3 games for those who didn't have a bye, and 1 comp restriction. I believe there were no dragons allowed, which is to some extent fair enough. I think dragons are pretty overwhelming at 2,000 points, and at 1,500 points, you can still take a dragon, and you have 500 points less to deal with it. At 1,250 points, you could even take a dragon.
You could.
Yeah, possibly, if you're that kind of player.
Yeah.
Spoilers
no restrictions on taking Wyverns or Griffins or Abyssal Terrors or all of the other things that are pretty good but not dragons.
Yeah. So normally in my list at 2,000 points, the Wyvern for me is an absolute staple, just as something to neutralize dragons. with dragons banned, it turns out the wyvern is actually the biggest and baddest unkillable monster left. And so because I was wanting to take stuff that I had painted, and I don't mind taking the wyvern anyway, I got to be the player with the biggest, scariest flying monster at the tournament now. So it's one of those classic things with comp, is that when you hit just something off the top, whatever's the next best thing becomes the new problem to deal with. You could ban all flying big monsters, but then that's going to lead into something else being just sort of the best thing that you can do in that new environment.
Although I would say I've played against the wyvern, and it's scary, and it's kind of fairly similarly tough to a dragon, but the output is nowhere near as terrifying. Like I had a wyvern, it took 3 rounds to get through a block of 20 swordsmen for Empire. Unsupported, but that very likely would have not taken 3 rounds for a dragon to munch its way through. So it's still very good. The wyvern is a great flying monster.
And there are some really subtle things, like the wyvern is not a behemoth, so it doesn't get armor piercing on its stomps.
No, that's it. Yeah.
And it only has D3 stomps. So it loses a bunch of the damage output, as you say, but it is kind of equally unkillable. I might have lost it in one game so far to damage, but that would have been like to the Chaos Dragon sort of levels of damage threat. Triple saves, still a problem, and I got to be the one with the problem at this event. So that was the start of my list. It was a Black Orc on a Wyvern with a triple save and a Cavalry Spear, which I think
is
might
Talisman of Protection and Trollhide Pants.
Absolutely. I've seen other people take the Great Weapon instead of the Cavalry Spear, so that you lose a point of save in combat, but you have +2 strength and AP2 all the time. I think that might be the better shout, because once you've got 3 saves, 1 extra point of the armor maybe not required, and I guess you can just go the hand weapon if you need it. And
when you don't have the monstrous number of attacks from the mounts, you really need the Warlord attacks to do the damage.
Yeah, so I think that's what I'll try going forward and see how that feels. Then I got to have a Night Goblin level 4 Shaman. I had one of the items that lets you re-roll casting rolls, Idol of Mork or something like that. But a lot of armies are kind of prevented from taking a big combat lord and a level 4 at below 2,000 points. Orcs and goblins, because goblin level 4s don't count, can have Black Orc war bosses and level 4s even at 1,000 points. So taking full advantage of that. And this is one of the problems with using, say, 1999 points as a way to try and tone down some of the excesses. Some armies just fly through without really getting penalized by it, orcs being maybe the primary force of that. We then have a Battle Standard Bearer with the War Banner in a unit of Black Orcs with the big red raggedy banner, my sort of standard full combat resolution bunker, and a unit of 20 Night Goblins with 3 Fanatics. More Fanatics would be better, but I don't have more Fanatics, and I'm happy to make a small concession to not writing the filthiest list possible. Then, rounding out the core slots, and my absolute MVPs, since I put them into the list, were 2 units of 5 Orcs with nothing. Just 25 points.
Skirmishing Orcs to get in the way of things.
One was skirmishing, one wasn't, because you're only able to take 1 unit of skirmishing.
1 per 1,000. Yeah.
But when you deploy them in marching formation, they can still move 12 inches, and they're pretty nippy. So they're just the cheapest diverter you could possibly get, at least in the Orc army. They're even cheaper than 10 goblins. And now that I've painted them, I can even give them war bows. So a tiny bit of extra flexibility. So that was the core. Then we had 1 unit of Squeak Hoppers, a unit of 5 Ball Boy Biggins, and a Mangler Squeak for some glass cannon action. But we end up with several diverters, a big hammer in the Wyvern, and a really good anvil in the Black Orcs. Other damage dealers didn't do a heap across the games, but having that extra threat is pretty helpful.
Nice. So the list, I'm guessing, pushes the 2 blocks up fairly centrally, keeps the Mangler out on the side, and the Wyvern kind of flies around, scaring off things, or then bunging in if there's anything that actually could threaten your combat blocks.
I think generally my preference is to actually have the Mangler centrally, or more
Right. Okay.
central. I've
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
been finding it cavalry outcharge it so easily, and it loses so much of its power when it's getting charged.
Yeah.
But I actually want to have it closer so that if people want to try and threaten a charge onto the Mangler, they're going to be walking into the Wyvern charge range. Whereas
Right.
on the
Yeah.
flank, all of the random movers just get isolated a bit too easily for my liking. That gets mitigated in larger games where you have more units and can cover more of the board with diverters.
Yeah.
But in general, the solo Mangler has been pretty mediocre. But when you've got some support around it to make sure it gets some charges off, really good.
Yeah, and I guess possibly even if you've got two Manglers, then they might charge one, but then the other one will ram into them and do some work in response.
Yeah, one Mangler can do a lot more than its points worth when it gets rolling. But it needs to actually make sure it starts getting the charges off to start making that progress.
And so your level 4 is running Illusion?
No, I've got him on War Magic, which...
Oh, right. Yeah. Really good.
Partly because I printed the cards for it, and partly because I really like how it fits in with the rest of the army. Between a couple of characters with the War rule, so you can get some conditional re-rolling ones to hit, and one of the spells, Red Sun Rising, I think, or Bad Moon Rising, giving you some more re-rolling of ones to hit. You can make the army a lot more reliable with those spells. So Illusion does some really good things for shutting down key individual models. I haven't been using it at 2,000 points, but especially in this format with Dragon's Band, I think the imperative to have Illusions probably dropped as well. So that would be... Go on.
Itchy Nuisance is just a preposterously good spell. Like as a signature, it's just the ability to drop toughness down, which almost no one has reliable ways to do. Being able to default into that is so powerful.
Yeah, especially when you can... I mean, you could go Illusion and swap out for Itchy Nuisance if you wanted. I think even regular Goblin Shamans to get access to Elementalism or cheap Elementalism Wizard. Again, being able to default to a super powerful signature makes these laws where you're normally at risk of rolling up a suboptimal set of spells. You're just always able to default to something really high impact. And the difference in toughness, dropping 1 or 2 points of toughness when you've got a lot of strength 5 and strength 6 means that the dragon that was unkillable suddenly drops to toughness 4 and you just wound it on 2s with most of your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just the dragon, right? There's so many targets in the game that rely on toughness to keep them alive. Things like the Tomb Scorpions, steam tanks, lots of even just chariots charging around with toughness 5 and a 3-up save on like a Gore Beast. That toughness drop really just completely means they're going to die to Black Orcs or Fanatics or whatever else.
Yep, and the level 4 is only 160 points base, so it's very easy to fit a couple of them. Double up on your Itchy Nuisance, just do horrible things. I think Orcs are a really powerful list, and there's certainly more you can do to take advantage of that than I've been running in the lists that I've had the models to take so far. But certainly in this format at 1,500 points, no dragons, my list was probably one of the more overpowered ones at the event. So then in round 1, I get a bye. We don't even have to set up the army. Skip straight.
That's a bit sad. It's always a bit of a bummer when you turn up to the tournament and get told to go have a coffee for 2 hours.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I've not been to Whitburn before, so not that there's a lot to the town, but I went for a little walk out into the countryside, grabbed a coffee, came back, got to heckle for the last 45 minutes or so of people's games. So a very relaxed start to the event. And then in round 2, go on.
How strong was the field? How competitively were people playing?
I think most people had gone for something that was like reasonable but not egregious. There wasn't anyone who spammed anything or pushed things super duper far. There was an Empire army which had a fairly large amount of shooting, but large amount of shooting in an Empire army isn't really the sort of thing that seems super mean or egregious. The Warriors armies weren't overwhelming with magic missiles.
Yeah,
The vampire arm only had one scream, so everyone had decent units, but not a kind of fully tune everything up to the nines kind of approach.
Yeah.
So with hindsight for that sort of field, I think dropping the Wyvern would have been a pretty reasonable approach. But then I would have had to paint more, and that's always really tough to justify.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially when how much fun flying monsters are.
Yeah. So round 2, your first game.
Yep, and I got paired against John's Chaos Dwarves, and the first time I played against Chaos Dwarves, which is helpful because they're not a real army. So I got to experience the imaginative world of what would happen if 5th edition armies were still played in the game. I jest, this is a bit that's been going on for a long time, but honestly, some of the things in this game, I should say, John's dice totally let him down, but what some of the units were capable of doing actually kind of impressed me. The game basically was turn 1, the giant Dreadquake mortar doom rocket hell cannon bazooka thing killed 2/3 of the night goblins, who panicked and almost fled off the table, but didn't quite flee off the table. So then they were able to rally and get back into fanatic range in a couple of turns. Then nothing else worked for the Chaos Dwarves. I think the sorcerer failed to cast Ash Storm 6 turns in a row, maybe 5 turns in a row before he got killed. It was that's
a bummer.
Yeah. So outside of that, in terms of the tactics for the game, there's not very much that you can do when your dice are abandoning you to that degree. And so I just had this enormous amount of initiative throughout the game because everything I was doing worked, basically. The thing that super impressed me from the Chaos Dwarf side, I guess one was how many Orcs and Goblins units they could get in, and the Orcs have some great magic items, so getting to take a couple of characters can be really helpful. Just sort of get your combat punch out of those, and then get the artillery and some chaff out of the Chaos Dwarves. The other thing that was
I really rate them. I think the Chaos Dwarves have got actually quite a flexible list for an army that hasn't had models available very much for the last 20 years. But the combination of like Black Orcs with the Chaos Dwarf Steam Train and Chaos Dwarf Sorcerer on a Bale Taurus, like that's really nice. I think that they're pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah, and the one unit that I just did not realize they could do this. I don't even know what they're called. Some kind of sneaky hobgoblin scouting skirmishers with slings and slings and weapons and moving and shooting, and for like 50 or 60 points for 10 of them, pumping out 20 shots and just getting massively into the backline and causing all sorts of problems.
The sneaky stuff, they're like gobbo skinks, basically.
Yeah. Never played against them before, did not know what to expect, and they were extremely impressive on paper. In practice, of course, John was like getting one hit from 20 shots on 5s.
Right.
It was
right.
And I guess the big problem with them was the levies rule. So when I was able to fireball them with my ruby ring, because
they just ran away.
It never got dispelled because John couldn't dispel anything. They then failed the panic test and Scarpa. So definitely a downside, but for those points, that unit seemed really good, and I like the pieces that the Chaos Dwarf army gets to play with. I think I agree with you. Maybe they don't have anything overtly egregiously broken, but lots of pretty cool and efficient units. The War Machines are spectacularly good by the standards of the old world. And then, the Orc units are good, and you can just take your pick of the best bits of the Chaos Dwarf army to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I rate it. I mean, I think they're a difficult one. Whenever I play around with their lists, you're really struggling that everything's quite expensive except for the Orcs and Goblins, and it's very easy to spend about 1,000 points on 30 guys and a character or something like that. But they're fun. But you just sort of found you were able to brute force them, basically. They sort of didn't have enough there with bad luck.
So we were playing I can't remember what the scenario is called. The new version of Watchtower. There's a terrain piece in the middle
Command
that you
and
have
control.
to capture. Yep. And I was able to basically send my Black Orcs towards that with, I think, a Mangler Squeak for some extra help. And that was able to bully away everything that John had sent in that direction. And then on the other side, the Wyvern almost soloed the Chaos Dwarves with, what was it? The Sorcerer Prophet on a flying monster, the Bull Taurox, the big war machine.
Yeah.
Wyvern just went, was able to go through the lot with a bit of help from some diverting and magic spells. But it was basically the case of I was able to run at the Chaos Dwarf army with none of their things functioning very well. So all of the things that John was trying to do, which I think were mostly the right sorts of things to try to do, just didn't work on the dice. So not a huge learning game from a sort of strategy point of view, but I learned a lot about the Chaos Dwarves. And if it wasn't for just not being able to bring myself to commit to them, I do like what they've got going on. And maybe that's you only need a few extra units to change up my Orc army that I've already got. So there might be
very, very tempting for an Orc and Goblin player to add about 25-30 models and have a whole Chaos Dwarf army.
Yeah, especially when those models are a Dreadquake Mortar, some Sneaky Stabbers, and just a couple of different characters.
That's it. You're done.
So that was game one. Game two, I got to play against Ryan, who was also my lift to and from the event. And so the way the tournament played out, there were potentially going to be several people ending up with 2 wins because I'd not played, but no one with 3 if I won. So I had missed the first round, and then there were going to be 2 or 3 people finishing on 2 wins and 1 loss. If Ryan wins the last round, he would be the only 3-0. And if I won the last round, I would be the only person with 2 wins but no losses, even though there'd be like a couple of other people on 2 and 1. So a little bit wonky, but that we were essentially playing the final because one of us would have the sort of best record if we won.
Sure. Yeah.
And this was a super cagey game where we again got to explore lots of the sort of technical and like the kind of precise side of things. Not so much in angling as with the game I was describing against Jamie, but just the timing on everything and what happened in each player's turn made a huge difference. So this is where the 2 units of 5 Orcs that I had basically won me the game.
So what was he running again?
He had Vampire counts with a level 4, level 2 BSB and a Banshee with a unit of 5 or 6 Blood Knights for rezzing and a big chunky unit of Graveguard. So
sure.
Sort of what you would kind of expect from vampires, except without abusing screams. However, when you have a Mangler Squig that is leadership 4, you don't need massive leadership debuffs for your screams to be really potent. And this game kind of was in a bit of a standoff for a while. I wasn't committing piecemeal to Ryan's army, and he'd done a really good job of disrupting my approach. So we were sort of jockeying for about 3 turns, mostly involving me failing to dispel the leadership debuff vortex. Which, because of that, my Boar Boys failed a couple of fear tests to charge in alongside the Wyvern, and so that all slowed everything down quite a lot. But the big key was these 2 units of 5 Orcs let me win deployment by 1, so Ryan had to put his Blood Knights down before I put my Fanatics down. So they just then went directly opposite, make a beeline straight for them. And that was exactly what happened. The Fanatics actually didn't do very much. I think 2 of them died and 1 of them killed a couple of Blood Knights. But because of where deployment had happened, they then had to sort of run away from the Wizards to resurrect them back. Otherwise, they were going to get crumped by the Wyvern. And so they end up running out super wide. And by the time they came back in, they only had time to fight the Boar Boys, or what was left of the Boar Boys. A really wonky situation where I wanted to divert with the Boar Boys, failed my impetuosity test, charged and got destroyed by the Blood Knights, who then failed their restrain test overran, and so they ended up getting diverted anyway, just in a more ludicrous fashion. But then the other thing my unit of 5 orcs did, and this was the one like super layered part of the kind of setup, is for the first few turns, all of Ryan's spells went off, and then in about turn 4, my dispels hit kind of everything in the one turn. I got rid of the vortex and also stopped the reserve move spell. So he had to choose between his Banshee moving out, screaming the Mangler, and then backing away. Luckily, the Mangler survived the first scream, so this was the second crack. So he had to choose between hanging the Banshee out to dry to trade for the Mangler, or just not doing it. And he went for the trade. But what that let me do was pass a fear test with those 5 orcs to charge past the Banshee into the Graveguard behind. And then the Black Orcs were able to charge the Banshee, crumble the Banshee, overrun into the Graveguard, and fight a second round of combat in the same turn. And that was kind of what snowballed the game to me. Because they got to fight twice in the one round, they battered the Graveguard, who did survive and got healed back. But it meant that by the time I was able to disengage from combat with them, it was in Ryan's turn. So I was able to combat reform, leave the Graveguard, and then go down the line into the Skeleton Spearmen that were fighting the Wyvern. Yeah. And so even though the Black Orcs maybe could have ground out the Graveguard over a few more turns, because they'd got that kind of initial like tempo boost from fighting twice in a turn, they were able to disengage, bail out the Wyvern, crumble the skeletons and the zombies, and sort of blow up the majority of the board. So there was still the Blood Knights, the General, and the Graveguard left, but I'd managed to take out enough points of chaff and those 2 sort of support blocks that I was able to grab a small win in the end, which meant that, as I said at the start, I ended up being the only undefeated player, although I did only have to play 2 games to get there. So a sort of controversial first place at the end of all of that. But again, a really interesting game against the vampire counts against an undead army, where the kind of layers of the old world really came to the fore.
So how with the army, what are the bits you're loving? I mean, I really like the tech on your static combat res unit, especially because you can also declare a war, right, with the BSB.
Yeah.
And so you're rocking in with like a rank, 2 banners, 2 for the different magic banners, another one for war. And so you're 7 combat res or something like that?
It depends on how wide you go. The way I normally set it up is that without the war, I'll have enough combat res to beat a dragon on musician.
Sure.
5 wounds plus an overkill. So I guess I'm starting on 6 combat res, an extra 1 if I call the war. And when you're not fighting a dragon, all of that combat res is gravy. You can go really wide to get more attacks, but you don't have to. Just getting 4 or 5 Black Orcs on the charge with great weapons does enough damage by itself. So I think the Wyvern is super. The Black Orcs are really good. The Orc Wizards, cheap level 4s, and the spell laws they have access to is great. And Fanatics are obviously incredible.
Just broken. just fundamentally too good. And the fact that they're untargetable feels like a mistake, you know.
And added bonus, all of that is characters and core. So you can often spend way more than minimum core and be really happy about it. You know, a couple of units of Night Goblins and Black Orcs. You're happy spending points on characters. The various special units and rare units are fine. Not really the sort of necessary or the kind of core part of the army. Your Manglers, your War Machines, Squeak Hoppers, they're good when they work, but they're also really cheap. So when they don't work, it's not really the end of the world. And the really reliable, solid parts of the army are the characters and those central core blocks. Veteran on the Black Orcs, absolutely the best upgrade in the game, I think. So many times where key terror tests, fear tests, reform tests, just getting a reroll on that where you wouldn't otherwise is absolutely crucial. And I would, every time I play a game without Veteran, I instantly fail a leadership test and either lose the game or desperately wish I'd taken that upgrade.
The flexibility of Veteran, because it's so much more widely applicable than BSB rerolls. It's just the value of it is through the roof. Like when you can get it, and it works on all the spells, the Tomb King stuff, the screams, all of that. It's super good value.
Yep, I'm just absolutely will always take it given the opportunity to. I think, I did try taking Stubborn on the Black Orcs for a while, and just never. It came up rarely, and Veteran comes up all the time.
Yeah. I mean, Stubborn's there for you for a unit who plans to lose combat, which that Black Orc unit shouldn't need to, really, right?
Ideally not. Occasionally they will, but even when they lose combat, as long as they're not outnumbered 2-1, then you just get to fall back and get a free rally and go 17 wide. So,
no, absolutely.
So that was my event. Good result. Got a couple of really fun games. One of them was sort of betrayed a bit by the dice, and then the other one was just a really hard fought game of mostly positioning and timing. Not so much any big, like big maneuvers or explosions of things. It was more, incrementally jockeying for position and the tide sort of slowly turning in my favor once I'd managed to get that the sort of double combat round off for the Black Orcs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding the more competitive games of Old World at the moment are very geometry hammer, like especially with the mechanics of pushback and how pursuit works at the moment and things. There's a lot of that angling that matters in a way where it used to be a lot more predictable where things were going to end up, and now you really need to plan a lot more because of the way things do move a lot more during combat.
But the flip side of that is that it feels like maneuvering and planning, not just in the movement phase, but for what will happen in your charges and your sort of post-combat phases, and what your opponent can do with their free reforms and deciding when they don't follow up. Does feel like there's a lot of depth to the game that I didn't appreciate on the first sort of read through.
Yeah, definitely.
So how about your tournament, Dave?
So I went to a 1250 point tournament at Element Games. This is the second one I've done there. Last time I took my Empire and came 4th out of 16. Again, these are small numbers, so you don't put too much weight into them. But last time about half the players had taken a dragon at 1250, and I played against 2 dragon lists with my Empire last time round. So I was like, okay, I won both those games, but I was like, let's lean in here. We're going to go dragon, and I thought, let's go back to my roots. I used to play a hell of a lot of Wood Elves with the 6th edition rulebook before they got replaced in Warhammer 8th edition, and so I went Wood Elves with like full pain in the ass, try hard tournament list basically. So I came along with a Glade Lord on a Forest Dragon with a great weapon. He's awesome with a great weapon because he has always strikes first, so he's still striking before most things. Really high initiative, Elven reflexes for +1 initiative in the first round of combat. He then has Talisman Protection, 5 up ward save. He's got Annoyance of Netlings for -1 to hit in challenges, which means that in most similar matchups in the challenge, he's probably going to take quite a long time to die. He probably doesn't win against like a Chaos Dragon or something like that, but they're hitting him on 5s, so he's pretty hard to get rid of. And then I took Lamentations of Despair, which is -1 to fear, terror, and panic within 6 inches, which my plan was people weren't going to have lots of leadership, but to be honest, it didn't really do anything. I found things were either getting eaten within 6 inches of me, or they were not, trying to charge me or things like that. So that's the leader. I then took a level 2 on Elementalism with the Ruby Ring of Ruin, who was fantastic. Elementalism has enough spells. It has 3 spells that I want out of the list. It has Plague of Rust, which is insane with Wood Elves. It has Wind Blast, which is one of the best magic missiles in the game. And it has Elemental Vortex or something like that. Elemental Spirits. Just a good, annoying Vortex spell. All 3 of them do add to my damage and keep enemies away from me. And then Wood Elves have a really good signature spell in Treacing, which just puts a piece of forest terrain in front of the enemy so they can't see you, can't charge you, and if they do, it's dangerous terrain. So you just
that's good, yeah.
Just to disrupt their army. Then I went 4 units of 5 Glade Guard with Hagbane tips for poison, 1 unit of 6 Deepwood Scouts with Hagbane tips for poison, an Eagle and a Tree Man. So the way the army plays is all of the points in the army are basically the Dragon, the Tree Man, and the Wizard. You have the Dragon kind of deterring you from getting close to my archers while they're chipping a bunch of wounds off you. If you do get close, the Tree Man is a very good anchor. He doesn't kill a lot, but he's very hard to get rid of. And you then can't get any points off me. And I'd really particularly planned this to play against other dragons because I thought the dragon will come and kill archer units, which is fine, 60 points a pop. I can happy to have them die. But the rest of the army should be able to kill more of most of the other armies who are running dragons before they get to me. So that was the plan. I thought it was a pretty grotesque list, to be honest.
The change from having minimum unit size 10 to minimum unit size 5 for the archers seems huge.
Yeah, it's massive. It's a massive change. And then the fact that archers are open order, which means you don't get to swift freeform anymore, but you get to move, sideways 3 inches, backwards 3 inches, and then do a free 90-degree pivot, means that their ability to avoid you is really over the top. And the way the army played was basically you outdrop the opponent. You have so many units that you're out deploying them, and the elves are trying to spread out across the deployment zone, actually quite far up, but then using movement to kind of spread the battle line out to slow and divert. So that was the plan. The plan: chip stuff away, punch in with the dragon, and clear up points. Pretty much.
And just give up a few points from a few archer units that get run down each game.
Yeah, exactly. Get rid of archers. If I really need to stop something getting in, I have an eagle there who can divert for 60 points. But the eagle costs the same as a unit of archers, so I don't need to use it for that purpose. But if I had to go, I could. So yeah, that was basically the plan.
And in practice,
first game up against Scott. Were we able to get the pictures up?
So there was a good order to this that was going to not look as garish. So
here we go. So first game up against Scott. Awesome old 5th, 4th edition dwarf army. Some of the 6th edition plastics as well. Really great infantry-based dwarf army. He ran the last tournament with quite an artillery-heavy army, sort of mixed arms dwarves, and said it went quite well for him, but hadn't done amazingly. This time he took 2 units of warriors for his core, big scary unit of iron breakers with 2 thanes and a rune priest in there, a unit of slayers with a demon slayer and 2 dragon slayers in the unit, and then a gyrocopter. So the army basically just has 2 anvils in terms of the dwarf warriors, who are quite hard to get rid of with shield wall and things, and then 2 fairly Death Starry infantry blocks and a bomber. To be honest, I saw this across the table and I just thought he's got very little chance of winning. Combat dwarves don't have a way to get to my army quick enough, and I am maneuverable enough that I can probably move around their charges. So turn 1, I move my dragon up, I move my eagle up, I move my tree man up, and then all of my archers stay around the edges. This is also command and control, so we have to control the central bit. I don't do a lot of damage at first, but he kind of spends the next 3 turns not really being able to get to anything except for my dragon. My dragon takes out the gyrocopter on turn 2, overruns into his warriors, takes out those warriors in another 2 rounds, turns around, gets the iron breakers, and my archers basically entirely kill with a combination of Wind Blast, the Ruby Ring of Ruin, and all the Hagbane tips, all of his slayers, all of his warrior unit, and then the dragon and the tree man go into the iron breakers. And it takes a few rounds to clear them up. But at the end of the game, which is a 50-point game, I end the game with 1,550 victory points, and he ends up with no victory points, not having killed a single model in my list.
I guess Go on.
Yeah, so it was a bit brutal. I mean, Scott was he was absolutely charming as a player, taking the way that the game went, but it was a rough matchup for him, and I just don't think a combat dwarf army without a bunch of ambushes and scouts has a way to respond to wood elves. Basically, I don't think they can get there.
Yeah, and the flip side is that even if they do have those ambushing scouting units, they're only going to get a few units of 5 archers, and all of your combat stuff can just do exactly what it did anyway.
Yeah, I mean, his big combat units with the characters were running around at like 300-400 plus points, and they're just not. There's no payoff there, pretty much.
Yeah.
Anyway, plan worked well. Nothing lost round 1. I thought, okay, that's fine. Now we'll play up against something really, really horrible in round 2.
And your opponent certainly did.
Yeah, and so I got to play against Matt. I played Matt in the first tournament. He was running the same list this time, which is a Chaos Lord on a dragon with almost all of the good stuff except for no Mark of Nurgle. But, 3-up save, 5-up ward save, 5-up regen, a bunch of attacks, the Eye of the Gods thing. He then has Chosen Knights of Khorne, big block of warriors, 2 units of dogs. I think that's it. So the previous game
from the picture as well, is that the Stormcast dragon converted up into a Chaos dragon?
Yeah, beautifully converted into the Chaos dragon. That Stormcast dragon is such a nice model as well. And Matt's used all the new Chaos warriors as well, so the army is super visually impactful too. I'm quite scared of this army, actually. The dragon is better than my dragon. Tougher, hits harder, has more tools. His Chaos Knights are chosen, so they got 2-up saves. They're fast enough to get into me. And then the big block of warriors, I can get rid of it with shooting, but it's actually pretty tough. So I don't love this that much. Matt, we're playing meeting engagement, so we're quite close to each other. He also has a unit of 3 dragon ogres as well. So
yeah, so there's too many threats for your dragon to be able to actually guard enough of the board, because once it commits to one of them, the other ones can go past it.
That's it. And even then, I'm not sure I really want to charge the Chosen Knights, because they will countercharge me. I could challenge them, but then we're sticking around for quite a long time. So yeah, a bit of a scary matchup actually for my army. Turn 1, Matt goes first. He rolls Eye of the Gods, rolls a 1. No worries, he's got Favor of the Gods, not a problem. Gets to re-roll it. Rolls a 1. Takes his leadership 9, I think it is. Stupidity check. Fails it. And then, I'm not sure if I got a picture of it. No, he then, runs forward basically into a piece of impassable terrain and can't. I mean, he can still see my army, but he's stuck there. So he's in range of charging my stuff on turn 1. I turn 1, charge his dragon ogres, kill them, overrun, catch them, reform to face his warriors. My archers kill both units of dogs, basically chip a couple of wounds off the warriors, and then my dragon goes into the warriors turn 2. I am able to use magic, especially the combination of Wind Blast plus just enough shots gets rid of the Chaos Knights. So I get a bit lucky there, but again, at this time I've thrown a lot of shots at them and I've hit them with 2 magic missiles.
Is there a wizard in Matt's army?
No wizard at all. No, you can't fit one with the Chaos Lord.
Yeah.
He doesn't fail his stupidity tech. I then place a forest in front of his Chaos Lord. So I haven't fully killed the knights. I think there's a couple of them left. His Chaos Lord is unable to see my army now because there's a forest in front of him, which he would have to dispel on an 11+ in his turn. And then I break his warriors in the first round, and then we double check the scenario and realize it's the one where you have breakpoints.
Yeah.
And his army is broken on turn 2. And that's the game. Because in the breakpoint scenario, when you get down below 25% of your unit strength, the game immediately ends and you count as having killed everything in their army. So 2 turns in, I have lost no models and technically killed his entire army plus a bit of extra for a banner. So second round, I'm 1,300 points up in a 1250 game. Still no models lost.
A very solid start. This is where, maybe we have different opinions on this, I think, but I'm not a big fan of scenarios. Never have been, maybe never will be in Warhammer style games. But this is an improvement on the way that the equivalent used to work in 8th edition, where if your general miscast on turn 1, the game could end before literally anything had happened. So this is certainly better, but still with potentially half of his points still on the board, feels like a bit of an unfortunately premature way for games to potentially end.
I think my view is the opposite. I mean, I especially like it for this reason. I mean, not against my similarly bullshit army, right? But the fact that it gives you a scenario where dragon armies, where they're investing, like lots of armies. I'm not sure what you're seeing in your local meta, but lots of people at 2,000 points are putting like 800 points into characters. And when you do that, and you're an army like Chaos Warriors, the downside is 1 in 5 games, people can go kill your other stuff and break you and win the game.
Yeah.
And that forces you to play a little bit differently. And I don't think that's a bad thing. The same with the command and control. I don't like that when you have the actual tower that you have to get into, but I quite like that with the central piece on the board. I don't think it makes massive difference, but I think it's kind of a nice twist.
I think I kind of agree about the effect it has potentially on the kind of game as a whole, but at least the way they're implemented, they do still seem to give more opportunities for games to be unfortunately less fun. I think we've talked about this with meeting engagement as well, where you can just randomly have your level 4 start off the board and they can deploy all their wizards in close range, or something similar like that. Your general starts off the board, you've got no leadership, and get rinsed in turn 1. That can happen some of the time. You can do things to mitigate that, but I guess it swings and roundabouts. More individual games that can be kind of less fun, but maybe pushes people to take armies that are a bit more balanced and more moderation overall. So maybe there's tensions in both direction.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, I'm less sold on. Is it meeting engagement, the one where the guy doesn't come down?
I think so. I can't remember exactly what they're called these days.
The one where you roll a dice and one person doesn't turn up. I think that I am more cynical about. Basically, I think that one has more feel bad moments, and it's very random as to who it hits. And like I've had a campaign game where we were playing narrative campaign. We decided to play it, and my opponent, poor Danny, just rolled 1s on his level 4 and his Griffin, and turn 2, I'm into his whole army, and that's kind of it. That's not fun. I think this one and command and control, I like them a bit more. Breakpoint and command and control. But yeah, anyway, Matt was a good opponent. I actually thought this is one where my list was not necessarily automatically going to trash him, right? I think it's actually a bit of a decent matchup between the two, but he got bit of bad luck with the stupidity. Even without the stupidity, to be honest, I probably liked my chances because he has so many points in those Warriors units for my Dragon to clean up, and I don't think his economy is going the other direction. I don't think his units are getting the points off me in return.
Yeah, but, I think if, as you say, once you've taken out like the Dragon Ogres and the Warriors, even if the Dragon and the Knights can clear up all of your archers, you're still going to be up on points and have the Knights as a potential target to go even further up. So definitely fits your plan of, against the other Dragon armies, just kill more points than they can kill from you.
Yeah, Yeah. So anyway, I was an interesting one to play. Round 3, I didn't take photos early on because I got white line fever and too hopped up on goofballs. I was playing Simon.
White Lion Fever. I thought that was a Nick Gentili thing.
Gentili thing, yeah, exactly. So I was up against Simon, who won the last one with Beastman. This time he was running his Empire and running quite a fairly similar list to what I was running previously. So 2 big blocks of Demigryph, 3 Demigryph, a big block of Knights for core. He had a slightly bigger second block of Knights than I did with the BSB. He then had, where I'd run a level 4 with Demonology, he had a War Altar of Sigma, which I really love. And he didn't take the Steam Tank. So not as strong a list as I'd done, I think, but a solid Empire kind of aggression cavalry list, basically. Everything is mounted. Basically, the whole list is either immune to psychology or causes fear. Nothing moves less than 7 inches a turn and just shoves 2 and 3 up armor saves into the opponent's face very quickly. So I thought, again, a strong list. I think my list had a leg up against this one, pretty much. I don't think he had an answer to the Dragon, and he had quite points-dense units in the Demigryph and the War Altar and the Knights. And my archers were not very effective into this matchup because, Empire 2s, 3s, the worst save in the army is a 4-up. But I sort of felt like, even with the amount of speed, I probably had his number. I sort of put down a fake flank early on with deployment, get him to place half his army on one side, then hard pitch onto the other side of the board. Because even though he is fast, movement 7, he's not so fast that he can actually wheel all his cavalry to the other side of the table. And with the Wood Elves being able to place a big forest down on the table and summon further forests, I was able to kind of shut down movement. In this one, he pushes aggressively with everything, as you'd expect. My Knights and Magic Missiles, and I would say in the whole tournament, I got Wind Blast every game, which was great. And that plus the Ruby Ring of Ruin and Tree Sing, Elementalism is just a fantastic spell lore, and Magic Missiles are surprisingly effective in the old world.
Yeah, and it looks like you faced mostly level 2 or no. Oh, was there a big wizard in this game?
No wizard at all. He's using the War Altar to make me -2 to cast. So I'm effectively casting as a level 0, which did shut down about half my spells, but no level 4 to dispel me in return.
Yeah. So, and in the previous game where you're able to maybe not kill things with your magic, but just being able to get down your forests, your vortexes to control movement or more reliably is super helpful. So I think a really good pick for that event.
And again, the Tree Sing it's like a budget version of Column of Crystal. The fact that it blocks line of sight does just mean you get to shut down charges and really cause problems with people's movement. So really powerful spell. He pushes up hard. My archers are able to clear out 1 unit of Knights and a Grand Master just from shooting and Magic Missiles. Wind Blast at AP 1 plus Fireballs and Archers just does do the damage on Empire Knights. And then he goes very aggressive against me and fails to realize that he's exposed his flank to my dragon. I've put my dragon hard on one flank, facing inwards to all my archers, with all of my army basically lined up in an arch below him, so that if you want to line up to the archers anywhere further along, basically, you have a very hard time not exposing your flank to the dragon. And he misses it, which is a bit unfortunate for him. I get the flank on the Demigryphs, punch through them, overrun into the War Altar. The archers and mage are able to kill the rest of the other unit of Knights. Dragon kills the War Altar. He then powers through into the other unit, the last unit of Knights. Meanwhile, the Demigryphs are doing a bit of bouncing with the Tree Man. I lose 1 unit of archers who flee off the board to avoid the Demigryphs getting into them and then reforming. Because one thing in this game that's really big is if you're going to flee and go off the board, or if they're going to catch you, you're much better off fleeing off the board, because they're either going to overrun to chase you and go off the board, or they're going to restrain and stay where they are. And that really slowed him down. Also, the fact that I was using my forest where I'd put a unit of archers inside the forest, and then when he puts a unit up to charge them, they'd just step back 3 inches out of line of sight. And so was able to slow him down long enough. And by the end of the game, when the tree man and the dragon had done their work, I'd lost 5 archers and killed his whole army, I think, on turn 3 or 4, something like that. So crossing.
Yeah, so in 3 games, you wipe out or kind of auto-end the game against all 3 armies.
Yep.
And lose a total of how many models?
I lose 5 models. 2 of my none of my opponents kill any of my models directly. No one shoots or fights any model to death in the whole tournament. And 1 unit of 5 archers that I voluntarily flee off the board.
Sounds like a pretty good result. So I take it you were victorious in your tournament?
I was. Fortunately, no one else had a perfect score, so I came away with the win. I did feel a bit bad this time. I think the armies were not quite as brutal as the previous tournament. I think Matt's army is still, that Chaos Lord 1250 is a problem. But Wood Elves are amazing. I really think after this tournament, it's really kind of reminded me of the fact that if people start getting Wood Elf armies onto the table, which they don't have them at the moment because they were never a very popular army back in the day, and they've been out of sale for a long time. But once people start getting them on the table, I think they're going to be a massive contender. I think they've got really good counters to a lot of the builds that people are running on top tables at the moment.
Because you get to both be a dragon army and also do something that the other dragon armies don't do and don't really want, which is have a bunch of shooting that you're guarding with a dragon.
You get to clear up points with your shooting, and then even if your dragon doesn't go and kill everything, there's a good chance you still win. And as long as you can avoid your dragon getting killed by a better dragon, which I think you can often do, especially with defensive kit, then I think you're in a good spot. And I think they were also one of the better armies going into the Vampire Scream list.
Because you can shoot off the Mortis engines.
You can shoot the Mortis engines because they're large targets. Poison shots, very effective at chipping wounds off Mortis engines. And if you're really worried about it, you can also add magic shots into archer units with characters, can give the whole unit magical attacks. Which, again, we'll see how hard the meta is leaning into ethereal, but I think pretty good at that. I just think the Wood Elves are fantastic. And this tournament also, I'd previously run Demonology, and I thought Magic, it's all right. It's not that great. This time, just running Elementalism with a Ruby Ring of Ruin, my God. Magic is so effective at that kind of role of just chipping stuff off.
Yeah, I've not really played around very much with the sort of shutdown spells yet, mostly because I haven't printed out the cards for it. So I'm just sticking with Wire and Battle Magic. But I'm a huge fan of Magic. It gives you so many buffs and so much control. I'm being very happy taking a couple of level 4s when you can fit them in. Probably not so much when you have a dragon yourself. But you could probably do non-dragon lists with like a tree man level 4 and an elf level 4, something like that if you wanted.
So to be honest, we're going to one of the Square Bast events in August, and I am very strongly thinking about taking a tree man ancient and a dragon. So because that as a level 4 with the dragon, and then with 2 units of Sisters of the Thorn for 2 more level 2s. Casting 1 bound spell from Elementalism or Battle Magic of my choice. I think it's good. The damage output, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, I don't know. I've all the models have arrived for my new project, but I don't know if I'll have time to get them painted by August. So there's a good chance I'll still be using Orcs and Goblins then. Not exactly sure what I'll do, because if I'm putting all my hobby time into the new project, then I won't have the time to paint another 30-something Night Goblins and 5 more Fanatics. Or whatever.
Fanatics, yeah.
So we'll see what exactly pans out for that. But I'm very much looking forward to some more 2,000-point tournaments. We've got one coming up here in Scotland in a couple of weekends, just as a one-dayer. But between that and Square-based in August, lots to look forward to gaming-wise, and a lot of hobby to do at the moment as well, which I've actually been finding really motivating at the moment. Not exactly sure why, but I'm just very on a real tear with hobby.
Yeah, me too. I've been punching out, well, mostly absolutely awful Empire State Troopers, but the Old World is, I mean, the biggest takeaway from me from the weekend is just Old World is so fun, and competitive games are a great time. Even if you're not running, filthy dragon lists. I enjoyed my previous time with the Empire list probably even more than when I did stomp people's teeth in with this awful, disgusting Wood Elf army.
Well, I guess this is where having a balance and being able to do both is probably ideal. You can run nice, fun Empire State Troops when you fancy it, and then other times when you enjoy a little bit of the high octane thrills of losing 0 models in 3 games of the Dragon, then you can dabble back into that. So I guess any reflections on I guess small tournaments, like playing at less than 2,000 points for people who have some of that in their horizons?
I think it's really fun. Like, I played a lot of games at 2,000 as well as at smaller points, and I actually really rate the smaller point one-day events. I would probably prefer to be at 1,500 than 1,250, and if it was me, I would probably be putting like harder points cap on characters. I'd probably just be like, you can't have any character that costs more than 350 points or something like that, just to stop some of the silliness that comes out there. But I think they're really good. They're not an accurate measure of competitive 2,000-point tournaments over 5 games, because I think there are some counters, for example, that I could have run into and had a hard time with. Tomb Kings, I think, is quite difficult for my Wood Elves to respond to, for example. I really don't like them. But I really rate them, and I think they're a good way, at least for someone like me who's got a small kid. I've got another tournament in July, and I can probably play one of these every 2 months, one-dayer. Whereas now, 2,000 points and 2 days is probably twice or 3 times a year at absolute max. What do you reckon?
Similar thoughts. I think 2,000 points, 3 games in a day, once we've got the sort of speed down and the rules understanding to do that, I think that's probably my ideal at the moment. I don't have a child to look after and raise and educate in the ways of the world, but nonetheless, with still quite a lot going on. So a one-day fits my weekends really nicely, and I think I enjoy the 2,000-point games a little more, just having more of an army and more options to play around with. But for those smaller games, I think the relative value of things changes in some cases quite a bit. So being able to get Dragon plus a Wizard, for example, for like the Chaos Army makes a huge difference. You get to both have your cake and eat it with the Dragon and the Wizard. But once you start playing it, 1,500, 1,250, that option goes away. And it changes the power level, I think, for armies. So like I said, Orcs and Goblins just don't have any real restrictions playing down at lower points levels. So you can just take whatever you want, you want.
I also think for like Orcs and Goblins, lots of the good things in your army are cheap enough that you can have multiples of them. Whereas I've been playing around with ogre lists and you just get nothing. Just like everything's so expensive that you can't. It's hard to feel like you have an army unless you just don't take characters pretty much. Whereas with your Orcs, you've got a level 4, a Wyvern, 2 big combat blocks, additional support units, chaff. Like, you've got a full army there.
Yeah, I mean, you could have multiple level 4s. You could probably have like 3 level 4s and 9 Fanatics if you don't want a Wyvern. So I think in terms of pure uncomped filth, I think Orcs might actually be a pretty good shout at these lower points levels where other people aren't going to have their full kit to try and deal with that. And as you say, the good stuff is really cheap, so you can just pack it all in anyway. I guess the other thing, as we've both demonstrated for people who maybe are looking at beating the filth rather than becoming the filth, being really aware of these big monsters and having a plan to deal with them, I think it's important at 2,000 points, but it's equally important, if not more so, in these smaller points levels where fewer people just naturally have the tools to deal with a large dragon, for example.
I think after playing this weekend as well, I just do also think, especially at the small points, but just in general, dragons are just too good. They're just too good. And obviously, I'm not suggesting we should be making big changes or anything, but I do think down the road, something that either drastically ratchets up the cost of dragons by like 150 points or something, or something that restricts their defensive kit is probably healthy for the game. Now, we're not there yet, and see, people might come with more responses like the Fnatic list and like the Scream list that both do very good things into the dragon. But I did really feel like I was able to completely bully people with the Wood Elf Dragon, who is one of the worst dragons. You know, he's got a 4-up save. Like, even and no regen. Even that just felt too good.
Yeah, I guess the time that Talisman of Protection remains unbanned is probably shrinking.
But even then, you're just risking who are the armies who get 5-up. Like, you know, Warriors of Chaos just have a 5-up ward save. Tomb Kings just have a 5-up regen. Vampires just have a 5-up regen.
That's true. Yep.
You know, you end up basically just countering like a very small number of the dragons that rely on that. And I think that I don't know. I think it's funny, you know, because I like with your Wyvern, I think he's very good, but I don't think that's the same problem as the dragons. And same with the Griffins and the other comparable flying monsters. The dragons, especially, they're just too good. They hit too hard. They're too durable. They're not scared of almost anything in the game.
Yep. And I guess the challenges for the moment, the challenges on us as a community to come up with more creative solutions, or for TOs to just decide some kind of arbitrary comp to stop it from happening. And I guess that's one thing where, for me at least, having a variety of different approaches in tournaments is really good. I'm much happier with every tournament having, you know, different points levels and different scenarios and things. Especially if some of the scenarios are worse for dragons in general or make them riskier, then that just gives you the chance to include those more often or have them happen sometimes. And yeah, I guess maybe the game can just evolve without there needing to be significant external intervention if we keep a good variety of tournaments.
Events, yeah. And also, I look forward to seeing what people do when they get access to more models, because I think hard MSU lists, if people aren't imposing the comp of max 3, which I think we are partly helping dragons by limiting MSU in the field, because that's something that dragons actually don't do that well, would just be another way. Just remove the comp that we're using that helps dragons. Like, go have 12 single dragon ogres, and your dragon can clean up 70 points at a turn.
Yeah, and I guess that's the sort of thing where a kind of knee-jerk reaction to being able to take 16 gyrocopters has in turn left what was actually the bigger problem kind of untouched.
Yeah. Well, we'll see when it comes to Square Base GT, and I'm running my 6 units of Glade Guard and then another 3 units of Deepwood Scouts into the game, and we'll see how overpowered that is.
I look forward to introducing them to my 3 Pillars of Fire and 4 Fireballs and 3 Blue Eyes.
Exactly. All right. So,
thanks for joining us, Dave, and giving us a rundown on how to win tournaments and alienate people from their victory points. And
we've been the Dwellers Below.
Don't fail your strength test.